County courthouse steps, 10 a.m., 4 bidders, 1 tax auction, and Lydia shrieking, "This is illegal," while I bought her clubhouse for $325,000, zero. 3 years earlier, this same woman had tried to fine me $15,000 over my grandfather's dock that had sat there since 1953. She insisted my family's Korean War vet cabin didn't meet her precious aesthetic standards. Lydia Cross, HOA president with flawless salon nails and the moral compass of a parking meter, had no clue that tormenting a union electrician would turn into the worst decision of her life. While she was busy firing off lawsuits and paying high-dollar attorneys, I was quietly uncovering that she'd never actually owned the land she was trying to rip out from under me. Now Lydia sends me a rent check every month just to use the tennis courts in what she calls her own neighborhood. What would you do if your HOA tried to swipe your family's property? Drop your wildest HOA nightmare down below. And where are you tuning in from? Because you're about to watch the most satisfying HOA takedown you've ever seen. Let me lay out how this whole disaster really began. My grandfather Hank built this 2-acre lakefront cabin with his own 2 hands back in 1953 after he came home from Korea. Every cedar shake, every plank in the floor, every rock in that fireplace. He placed them all himself. The man survived Heartbreak Ridge. Throwing himself into building a cabin was how he healed. The scent of those original cedar shingles still hits you when you step through the front door, blended with decades of wood smoke and strong coffee. I inherited the place after a brutal divorce that stripped me of half of everything I owned. 25 years of marriage, gone. But Grandpa Hank's cabin, that one was mine. Free and clear, with full water rights that were on record 40 years before any fancy place popped up around this lake. So there I was, 52 years old, trying to put my life back together in the same spot where I learned to tie fishing knots as a kid. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent 3 decades as a union electrician dealing with power-drunk idiots, and now all I wanted was some quiet and some breathing room. That's when Lydia Cross rolled into my world. Picture this: white BMW X5, a tennis outfit that probably cost more than my monthly pension, and those fake acrylic claws that go tap, tap, tap on her ever-present clipboard. Lydia was 48, married to some hedge fund hotshot, and had moved to the lake 3 years earlier with one goal: turning our peaceful community into her private empire. The sound of those pricey tires grinding over my gravel driveway still makes my blood pressure jump. "Good morning," she chirped, that rehearsed real estate smile glued to her face. "I'm Lydia Cross, Oakview Bluffs HOA president. This is Mark Dillon, our board member." Mark was her classic yes man, middle management type who'd probably gone his whole life without actually saying no to anyone. He stood there clutching a pile of paperwork like it was made of pure gold. "Beautiful morning," I said, staying put in my porch chair. "Coffee's hot if you want some." Lydia's smile twitched just a bit. She clearly wasn't used to folks not leaping up to greet her. "Well, actually, we're here on official business. Your dock violates our new aesthetic standards." I looked out at my grandfather's dock, the same solid wooden structure that had made it through 47 winters. That dock's been sitting there since Eisenhower was in office. "Sir, I'm sure you understand we're trying to protect property values here," Lydia went on, her tone taking on that condescending sharpness. "The Homeowners Association has voted to roll out new compliance standards. Your dock needs to be upgraded to match our community aesthetic, or," she paused for dramatic effect, "we'll need you to pay a $15,000 compliance fee." I almost spit out my coffee. "Lady, my property was holding up values before your subdivision was even a cornfield." She handed me an official-looking violation notice with a 30-day deadline. "I'm sure once you read through the HOA guidelines, you'll see this is actually quite reasonable." That's when I realized I was dealing with somebody who'd never heard the word no in her entire pampered life. The kind of person who believes that a logo at the top of a letter automatically makes her right. After they pulled out of my driveway, I called my union buddy Ray, who'd gone through paralegal training. "Bring me every scrap of paperwork you've got," he said. "Something about this stinks." 2 days later, Ray was parked at my kitchen table with a pile of legal documents and a grin wide enough to crack his face. "Luke, you're not going to believe this. Your land legally can't be pulled under HOA rules. It beats their incorporation date by 4 decades. Here's your first knowledge nugget. Always cross-check your deed's recording date against the HOA's incorporation date. Don't overlook this. Older parcels often have grandfathered protections that can't just be bulldozed. I drafted Lydia a civil but unshakably firm letter laying out my legal position. Professional, respectful, but absolutely unmistakable that her 15 grand shakedown wasn't happening. The pricey perfume she'd been wearing still hung in the air hours after she left, a harsh contrast to the clean pine smell of the lake. I had no clue that letter was about to kick off a war. Lydia got my letter and clearly didn't handle it well. 2 days later, I had a surprise knock from county code enforcement. Routine inspection, they called it. Sure. The inspector was a guy named Carl, decent sort, probably mid-50s, with the kind of solid handshake that tells you he actually knows his trade. I welcomed him in with coffee and donuts because that's how you treat people who work for a living. "Beautiful place you've got here," Carl said, taking in the craftsmanship as his boots thudded over Grandpa Hank's original hardwood floors. "They don't build them like this anymore." "My grandfather was a perfectionist," I said. "Korean War vet. If it was worth doing, it was worth doing right." Carl's eyes warmed. "No kidding. My dad served in Korea too." That's when I dragged out the old photo albums, and Carl spent 20 minutes flipping through pictures of Hank and his unit. Funny thing about that inspection, my septic system had already been checked just 6 months earlier for the divorce paperwork and passed without a hitch. Carl confirmed everything was still in perfect shape, but then he said something that made my ears perk up. "Luke, I probably shouldn't be saying this, but this complaint came through some unusual channels. Normally we get calls from neighbors or anonymous tips. This one came as a formal request from someone with connections. Here's a knowledge nugget for you. Any communication between an HOA and government officials is public record. Always file a Freedom of Information Act request to get copies. That's your right as a taxpayer." So that's exactly what I did. Filed a FOIA for all correspondence between the Oakview Bluffs HOA and code enforcement. Ran me $12 and 3 weeks of waiting. What came back was pure gold. 17 emails between Lydia Cross and her brother-in-law over at code enforcement. 17. She'd been methodically targeting properties around the lake using family ties to hassle people into compliance. And I wasn't the only mark. Carl had mentioned that 3 other lakefront owners had been hit with the same kind of random inspections around the same time. So I started making phone calls. That's how I met Elaine Brooks. Elaine was 78, a retired elementary school teacher with kind of sharp mind that can spot a cheater from across the playground. She'd been at the lake for 15 years, and Lydia had been making her life miserable for the last 6 months. "That woman told me my flower beds were a nuisance vegetation violation," Elaine said, her weathered hands pointing to where someone had moved her property survey stakes. "My daisies, can you even believe that?" Elaine invited me in for coffee, and that's when I realized Lydia's little operation was bigger than I'd guessed. She'd been zeroing in on older residents, people she figured wouldn't push back. Classic bully strategy. "But look at this," Elaine said, spreading out the FOIA emails on her kitchen table. Her reading glasses slid down her nose as she peered at the pages. She actually wrote, "These old-timers don't understand progress." The pattern was obvious. Lydia would pick out properties she wanted under her thumb, then use her brother-in-law to pump out official complaints. Owners got spooked by the government letterhead and either coughed up money or sold and left. But here's the thing about going after a union electrician and a retired teacher. We both knew how to read paperwork, and neither of us was new to dealing with bullies. Elaine had kept everything, every violation notice, every threatening letter, every slip of mail. The woman was organized like a field commander. 43 years of teaching middle school, she said. You learn to document everything. We started hosting casual coffee get-togethers at my place. Word traveled quietly around the neighborhood, and before long, we had a regular circle of Lydia's targets sharing stories and lining up their paperwork. That's when Grant Walker showed up to the third meeting. Retired Coast Guard, knew maritime law backwards and forwards. He took one look at the harassment pattern and his jaw clenched. "This is systematic intimidation," Grant said, his military bearing still sharp at 65, "and it's illegal as hell." Grant confirmed what I'd already suspected. My doc rights were bulletproof. Not only was my land grandfathered in, but I had riparian rights that went back long before the entire subdivision existed. The best part, Lydia's own attorney could have told her this if she'd bothered to get proper advice before kicking off her little shakedown campaign. We were building a case, but Lydia was just warming up. The smell of hot coffee and Elaine's homemade pie filled my cabin during those planning sessions. A nice contrast to the toxic mess we were unraveling. There's something powerful about decent people banding together against wrongdoing. By the end of that first month, we had documentation, we had witnesses, and we had a strategy. Lydia Cross had picked the wrong neighborhood to terrorize. 2 weeks after we'd started our quiet little resistance group, Lydia must have realized something was brewing, because she went straight into attack mode. I was in the middle of my birthday cookout, neighbors gathered around, burgers sizzling, the lake breeze carrying the smell of charcoal, when an aggressive process server marched right onto my property, pushing legal papers at me like he was delivering a bomb. "Luke Harris, you're being served." The lawsuit claimed my dock created some kind of navigation hazard and demanded immediate removal. Lydia had hired Crandall Pierce, one of those sleek downtown firms that charge $5,000 an hour, to look intimidating. The smell of burnt burgers lingered as I flipped through the legal jargon, my guests forming a tense circle around me. But here's the thing. Seeing that server interrupt a friendly birthday barbecue did something to everyone who witnessed it. This wasn't just my problem anymore. "This is harassment, plain and simple," said Jasmine Lee, one of the newer residents. She was an accountant, usually quiet, but when she spoke, people paid attention. "I've seen this kind of financial bullying before." Jasmine offered to go through the HOA's financials. "If she's this aggressive about your dock, I'd bet money she's hiding something in those books." Meanwhile, Ray, my union buddy, showed up with a cardboard box full of research he'd been gathering. The man was practically glowing. "Luke, you will not believe what I dug up on your pal Lydia." He spread the documents out over my picnic table like he was unveiling treasure. 2 ethics violations on her real estate license in the last 5 years, both tied to misrepresenting property boundaries. But then came the real bomb. The original developer of Oakview Bluffs had gone belly up 3 years earlier, leaving behind $340,000 in unpaid environmental impact fees. The county had been chasing the debt ever since, but no one knew who was legally responsible. Here's your next knowledge nugget. Property lien searches through your county recorder's office usually cost no more than $15, but they can uncover hidden debts or legal landmines tied to entire neighborhoods. Ray had spent 2 full days at the courthouse piecing it all together. Those unpaid fees were supposed to be settled before the HOA officially took over the common areas, but the transfer had never happened correctly. Grant Walker, our maritime expert, confirmed what Ray suspected. "Your dock rights are federally protected," he said. "Lydia can sue all she wants, but she's got no legal leg to stand on. It's like trying to sue somebody for having a sidewalk." We were already building a strong defense, but I decided we weren't just defending anymore. We were going on offense. My union lawyer told me it was time to file a countersuit for harassment and abusive process. The key was documentation, so I started carrying a small digital recorder everywhere. Ohio is a one-party consent state, completely legal. Always document everything. Photos, audio recordings, where legal, dated summaries, because paper trails win cases. That 4th of July, the community held a big lakefront gathering. Kids waving sparklers, grown-ups grilling hot dogs, the kind of classic small-town celebration you see on postcards. That's when Lydia showed up, flat-out drunk, not just tipsy, gone. She'd been partying at the country club and stumbled over to our event in a wine-soaked haze, her heels snagged in the grass, wine spilling from her plastic cup. "I don't care what some old hillbilly thinks he owns," she slurred, her voice slicing through the chatter. "This is my lake now." My recorder was running, every word captured in crystal clarity. The entire gathering went silent. Kids froze mid-run. Even teenagers put their phones down. You could practically hear crickets. "Ma'am," I said calmly, "maybe you should head home and sleep this off." "Don't you tell me what to do," Lydia screeched. "I'm going to destroy you. I'll take everything you own." Elaine Brooks, 5'2", 78 years old, the woman who'd handled screaming parents for decades, stepped forward. "Young lady, you are embarrassing yourself and this entire community." Lydia tried arguing with Elaine, But you don't win a shouting match with someone who survived decades of middle school teaching. Mark Dillon, Lydia's loyal yes man, finally stepped in. He took her arm gently, face flushed with embarrassment. "Come on, Lydia, let's get you home." But the damage was already done. Everyone there saw her meltdown. By the next morning, the entire lake knew. Thanks to my recorder, so did my lawyer. Lydia's harassment lawsuit suddenly looked very fragile, and that was before things got truly dirty. A week after her drunken meltdown, Lydia escalated from petty to outright malicious. Early one morning, I opened my door to find an EPA inspector standing on my porch. Someone, gee, wonder who, had filed an anonymous complaint accusing my old cabin of leaking sewage into the lake. The timing? The exact same day my lawyer filed our countersuit. Total coincidence, right? But here's the thing about working as a union electrician for 30 years. You learn to anticipate dirty tricks. I'd already paid for independent water testing weeks earlier, just in case someone tried to pull this exact stunt. The EPA inspector, a sharp and no-nonsense woman named Dr. Selena Park, spent nearly 3 hours taking water samples by my dock, checking the septic system, and inspecting every inch of shoreline. "Mr. Harris," she finally said, sunlight glinting off her testing vials, "these are some of the cleanest water samples I've taken from this lake all year." Here's another knowledge nugget. Private environmental testing costs around $2,000, but it can protect you from false accusations and uncover the real culprits. In this case, Dr. Park's test revealed something Lydia never expected. The pollution wasn't coming from my 70-year-old cabin at all. It was coming from the manicured lawns and poorly engineered stormwater system of Oakview Bluffs. Fertilizer runoff from Lydia's perfect subdivision was dumping phosphates straight into the lake every time it rained, 300% above safe levels. Grant Walker had noticed the same thing earlier in the summer from his boat. "Every hard rain brings these algae blooms," he told me. "Water turns green near those storm drains like clockwork." Meanwhile, Jasmine Lee was deep into the HOA's finances. What she uncovered was jaw-dropping. "Luke, look at this," she said, spreading out printouts across my kitchen table. $88,000 in landscaping fees over the last 2 years, and all of it went to Cross Landscaping, Lydia's husband's company. The HOA president had been funneling association money into her own household, raising dues, eliminating transparency, signing contracts with herself. It was corruption, plain and simple, and it ran deep. Elaine Brooks brought another bombshell. She'd spent half a week combing through 3 years of HOA meeting minutes. "She never properly called elections," Elaine said, tapping a page with her finger. "Lydia has been serving illegally this entire time." Our cabin-turned-war room was overflowing with documents. The steady hum of the library copy machine had become part of my daily routine. Between Jasmine's forensic accounting, Grant's maritime law knowledge, Ray's legal digging, and Elaine's meticulous documentation, the picture was clear. Lydia had built an entire kingdom on fraud, intimidation, and procedural violations, and it was all about to come crashing down. Lydia's fancy downtown lawyer made several procedural mistakes in court, missed deadlines, wrong filings. My attorney called with barely contained excitement. "Luke, she just handed us a win. Her attorney practically sank her case for us." But the real blow came when the local newspaper picked up the story. HOA president accused of environmental cover-up splashed across the front page of the Lakeview Herald. Reporter Dana Ruiz, an investigative bulldog, dug deeper. She uncovered the ethics violations on Lydia's real estate license. She found inconsistencies in HOA elections. She even caught wind of the pollution issues. And Lydia? She refused every interview. Her PR representative gave stiff, awkward statements that only made her look guiltier. Social media exploded. Neighbors who'd been too afraid to speak suddenly came forward with their own stories. She fined me for having a wind chime. She threatened to sue us over our mailbox color. She told me retirees were dragging down the property values. The community turned fast. Meanwhile, Dr. Park's official EPA report completely dismantled Lydia's lawsuit. You can't claim someone's dock is an environmental hazard when the government's own testing says their water is pristine and yours is toxic. My countersuit? Now stronger than ever. Harassment, abusive process, fraudulent complaints, financial misconduct. The list kept growing. Lydia Cross had no idea how badly she'd miscalculated, and she still had one more spectacular meltdown waiting to happen. Things took an even darker turn when Lydia got desperate enough to resort to sabotage. It was 2 a.m. when the security camera, installed on Grant's advice after the harassment started, caught her creeping around my dock with a pair of bolt cutters. The night vision footage was crystal clear. There she was, dressed in dark clothes like some suburban cat burglar, cutting through the ropes that secured my grandfather's dock to the shoreline. You could actually hear the snap of the rope fibers and the splash as the dock drifted and bumped against the rocks. Here's a knowledge nugget worth remembering. Security cameras on your own property are legal everywhere in the U.S., and upgrading to night vision is a must if you're dealing with unstable neighbors. I didn't confront her. Instead, I walked into the sheriff's office the next morning and handed Deputy Fields the footage. His pen scratched across the police report while he shook his head. "This is escalating into criminal territory," he warned. "Keep your doors locked. People like this can spiral fast." By noon, the video was circulating on the neighborhood Facebook group. By 5 p.m., it had gone viral in the entire county. Even Lydia's remaining supporters faded into the shadows. At the grocery store, at the gas station, at the country club, you could feel the shift. People whispered, people stared, people avoided her. And that's when Lydia made her biggest mistake yet. She approached me privately at the marina, probably thinking she could corner me. She didn't know I had my digital recorder running. "Look, Luke," she whispered, eyes darting around, "I can make this all go away. I'll pay you $50,000 if you move out and drop the lawsuit. People like you don't really fit in here anyway." "Ma'am," I said slowly, "are you trying to pay me off?" "I'm trying to be reasonable," she hissed. "Take the money, leave, and we'll pretend this never happened." That recording? Pure legal dynamite, bribery, coercion, and a line that sounded a whole lot like discrimination. Harassment cases don't get more airtight than that. When I played the audio for Dr. Selena Park, for Jasmine, for Ray, for any of them, they were speechless. "Luke," my attorney said, rubbing his temples, "she just committed 3 crimes in one conversation." Meanwhile, the environmental investigation deepened. The EPA found massive violations in Oakview Bluff's stormwater management, untreated runoff, illegal discharge, failing systems. Then the state environmental agency got involved, and the local news cameras showed up. Reporter Dana Ruiz was relentless, following the money trail between the HOA, the Cross family businesses, and various county officials. Lydia refused interviews. Her PR guy looked exhausted every time he made a statement. The community snapped. People were angry, furious about the pollution, about the corruption, about the intimidation. A fundraiser for legal fees raised $12,000 in a weekend. Volunteers created a lake preservation task force. Neighbors who barely nodded at each other before were suddenly united. Lydia, desperate to regain control, filed for a restraining order against me, claiming I was intimidating her. The judge denied it in seconds. "No evidence," he said. "Petition dismissed." The courtroom clerk added quietly, "Ma'am, your attorney has withdrawn from the case." Turns out Lydia hadn't paid her legal bills, and her lawyer cited ethical concerns. So there she was, representing herself, against a community, an environmental investigation, documented criminal behavior, and my increasingly devastating countersuit. And then came the bombshell that would change everything. Jasmine discovered that the HOA had never actually been transferred legal ownership of the common areas. Not the clubhouse, not the tennis courts, not the beach, not the lake access. The developer had gone bankrupt before the paperwork was properly completed. Legally, the county owned everything Lydia thought she controlled. For 3 years, nobody had paid the property taxes. Here's your next knowledge nugget. Never assume an HOA actually owns the land it claims to manage. Always verify deeds, transfers, and tax status, especially with developments tied to bankrupt builders. Back taxes owed, $127,000. My post-divorce savings, $340,000. And that's when the plan was born. The county scheduled a tax auction in 3 weeks. I could buy every inch of Lydia's pretend empire. I didn't hide the plan from the community. I told them straight up at the next meeting. If I win the auction, I said, the clubhouse and facilities will stay open to everyone here. Fair prices, full transparency. The room erupted in applause. Lydia stormed out. From that moment, we prepared like a coordinated unit. Ray handled the legal filings. Elaine organized the neighbors. Grant documented environmental and historical evidence. Jasmine tracked every financial inconsistency. Environmental lawyer Dr. Park helped file federal reports. Even the younger families stepped in. Flyers, social posts, community outreach. And Lydia? She spiraled. She hired a private investigator who turned out to be an old friend of Grant's. He reported everything back to us. She spread anonymous flyers claiming I was a dangerous veteran with PTSD. I'd never served a day. Elaine traced the flyers to Lydia's real estate office using watermark analysis. She attempted back-channel deals with county officials. She tried to intimidate neighbors. She even filed bogus noise complaints. Everything backfired. Every move she made helped us build an even stronger case. 10 days before the auction, the EPA confirmed a potential multi-million-dollar fine tied to the pollution. Liability that would fall on the HOA's non-existent ownership. When homeowners found out, they exploded. The HOA board resigned instantly. Mark Dillon apologized publicly. Neighbors demanded Lydia step down. She refused, claiming she was the rightful president. Nobody listened. Auction day arrived. Sunny morning, 10 a.m. courthouse steps, 4 bidders, me, an anonymous LLC, almost certainly Lydia's husband, a property developer, and an environmental group. The opening bid, $127,000. The bidding shot upward, 200, 230, 250, 280. Finally, only the LLC and I remain. Then I made my final bid, $325,000. The auctioneer raised his gavel. Going once, going twice, sold. The crack of that gavel echoed like a thunderclap. Lydia screamed. Not yelled, screamed. The deputies had to hold her back as news cameras rolled. I looked into the camera and said calmly, well, I guess I just bought my neighbor's clubhouse. Looks like they're my tenants now. The crowd erupted. Cheers, applause, relief. The sheriff served Lydia an eviction notice. Not from her house, but from the facilities she thought she owned. 30 days to pay dues or lose access. My new rental rate for her, $15,000 a month. The same amount she tried to extort from me. And that was the day the war ended. The aftermath was pure restoration. I opened the clubhouse to the whole community. $50 for families, $25 for seniors. We painted, repaired, cleaned. Kids filled the playground again. Elaine won the new HOA election with 89% of the vote. Environmental restoration began immediately. EPA grants came through. Native plants returned. Algae blooms vanished. Fish came back. Property values soared again. Jasmine and I began dating. She moved into the cabin last month. The Grandpa Hank Memorial Scholarship launched with $25,000 from the countersuit victory, helping local students enter trade schools. My YouTube channel, Know Your Land Rights, hit 50,000 subscribers. Grant consults on waterfront property cases. Elaine wrote a book on fighting HOA abuse. Lydia? She lost her real estate license. She faced criminal charges. She sold her home to cover legal debt. She works quietly at a hardware store now. When we bump into each other, we exchange polite nods. People change, life goes on, and every evening I sit on my rebuilt dock, watching clean water ripple under the sunset, my grandfather's flag waving overhead. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's building something stronger than what they tried to break.